While others crammed everything they wanted to do in one lifetime, Rishe did hers in 6 and counting. The villainess and Duke's daughter, Rishe, had been reincarnated for the 7th time. She lived all her previous lives fulfilled, and she plans on doing the same in her 7th. But why is the tyrant crown prince who had killed her in her last life asking her hand in marriage now? Is this unexpected twist of fate meant to be, or just a passing phase? Get excited, dear viewers! Today, you'll be watching another shoujo anime recap set in the medieval era, with a regressor princess and a war-driven prince. Our story starts during a chaotic night as 2 groups of soldiers fight to the death. A man wearing dark clothes walks leisurely to the castle, unbothered by the chaos around him. A group of soldiers in white, obviously not on the man's side, stood guard by the hallway, swearing to hold on until the royal family escaped. But this didn't prove easy to do, with the man's appearance in front of them. His name is Arnold, the Emperor of Galkine and the instigator of this war. Despite their disadvantage, the group of soldiers still attacked the Emperor. In no time, one by one, they fell and died. The last to fall is the pink-haired soldier who managed to nick the Emperor's face before his sword impaled them. The soldier dies with thoughts of not regretting anything in this life, although he promises that the next time will be different. When the soldier comes to, she is now wearing a dress and being addressed as Rishe Irmgard Weitzner by the crown prince in front of her. Rishe calmly accepts this and rushes off from the hall away from the obnoxious prince, intending to leave as soon as possible. It turns out that she turned back in time, not for the first time either. In fact, this is her 7th life. Rishe remembers the first time the prince rejected her. Not only was she accused of crimes she didn't commit, but even her parents abandoned her. Just as she lost all hope while wandering aimlessly, a group of traveling merchants found her and offered to take her in. Under the guidance of Chief Tully from the Aria Trading Company, she learned the trade until she could build her own group and travel the world. When there was just one country left on her list, she got swept into a war and died. When she came to, she was once again back in that hall with the obnoxious prince in front of her. Recovering from her shock shortly after, she rushed to their house and gathered her stuff before meeting the traveling merchants. Unfortunately, they had already gone. Inspired by her grandmother's book on foreign medicinal plants, Rishe uses her previous merchant experience and decides to become an herbalist. She even manages to cure the sickly Prince Kyle from the north. But just like in her previous life, she gets swept up in a war and dies once again. In her 3rd life, Rishe set her sights on becoming a scholar under the teachings of Dr. Michael Evans, who was a close acquaintance in her 2nd life. Not long after, they parted ways as she continued her research alone. Soon after, she got swept up in a war again and died. In her 4th life, she was a handmaid in a duke's household and a disguised soldier in her 6th. She lived all her previous lives to the fullest, although every time she would die 5 years after returning. But she promised herself that her 7th life would be different. This time, she would take it easy and live a long, carefree life. As she hurried into the hallway, she thought of using a different path this time to save more time. But when she turned the corner, she suddenly bumped into someone. To her surprise, it was none other than Arnold. Rishe caught herself and politely curtsied at him and hurriedly excused herself, explaining that she just had her engagement broken so she's in a hurry. Without another word, Rishe jumped a good 10 feet height from the balcony, as if nothing. And since this is a fantasy anime, of course, she's totally fine when she reaches the ground. The prince, amused by what he just witnessed, tells his attendant to prepare his horse as he leaves with a smile on his face. Meanwhile, just as Rishe was about to reach their place, she noticed many people gathered outside, including her parents and the obnoxious crown prince, who made an extra effort to rush to her place just so he could gloat for rejecting her. Rishe is very annoyed at the timing of things, and she didn't hesitate to let the prince know that as she called him an idiot and declared that she wasn't even sad about his rejection. Hearing this, the common people and even his own soldiers started snickering at the prince. Just then, another girl shows up to defend the prince, acting all innocent and pure, while low-key painting Rishe as the villainess. Turns out, this is Marie, supposedly the victim of Rishe's bullying. But Rishe just encourages Marie and promises she will never get in their way. With that all said and done, Rishe excused herself while trying to think of a plan for what to do next. A soldier tried to stop her, which was fortunate since the moment Rishe turned the corner, Arnold suddenly appeared and attacked her. And if it weren't for the soldier's sword, Rishe would have been in trouble. Arnold only has praises for her skills. Not that they hold any meaning to Rishe given his identity, which she didn't hesitate to declare to everyone, especially to her obnoxious ex-fiancé. Anyways, not wasting any more time, Rishe asks Arnold what he came there for. To her surprise, he suddenly knelt and asked, "Would you please give me the honor of becoming my wife?" Everyone was surprised with the proposal, but not as surprised when Rishe rejected it. Instead of getting upset, however, Arnold just started laughing. Shortly after, the king arrived and immediately made his son bow before them. The old man also apologized to Rishe and asked her to accept Arnold's proposal. Understanding the meaning behind the king's actions, Arnold stepped up and assured him that Rishe's decision wouldn't affect the relationship between their nations. He then asked to talk privately with Rishe, not even giving her room to refuse. Later that evening, Rishe is still very suspicious of Arnold's intentions, although he insists that he fell in love at first sight. Weighing her options and the fact that he has started wars in all of her lives, she wonders if, by staying beside him, she'd know the reason behind them. So, Rishe decided to accept his proposal, but with conditions, which Arnold promised to comply with. First, she would buy all the materials needed for their wedding through her chosen trading company. Second, she wants to have a gathering to meet guests from other countries. She also would like to live somewhere far from the emperor and, at the same time, be allowed to laze around and not do any work. In addition, she requests that Arnold not touch her. Not long after, the couple leaves the kingdom without a hitch. While traveling, Rishe made sure to gather different types of plants. One day, their group was suddenly attacked by unknown men. Arnold went out of the carriage and locked Rishe inside. Annoyed, Rishe secured hairpins to unlock the carriage door, something that she learned to do when she was a handmaid. Arnold was just about done apprehending the attackers when Rishe got out. Contrary to what she imagined, however, Arnold didn't kill, and instead just wounded them. It wasn't just the attackers who were wounded, however, but also some of the prince's soldiers. Rishe quickly realized they were poisoned and volunteered to make an antidote using the plants she had gathered earlier. Everyone was initially suspicious, but after she made a bold move and used it on herself, they had no choice but to take it. Later that day, Arnold came to Rishe while she gathered more plants, noting that the plants had medicinal purposes. Arnold then thanked Rishe for what she had done to his soldiers, whom he had handpicked himself and cared a lot for. Their talks turned towards what Arnold had told the emperor about her. He honestly tells her that she will be viewed as a hostage in the empire and might be looked down upon by others. This works great for Rishe, since it means that no one's expecting anything from her, and she can definitely just do what she pleases. Days later, Rishe was pretty excited the moment they entered the empire's capital. After all, it was the only country she hadn't been to. After arriving at the palace, she was informed that the villa where she was supposed to stay had yet to be prepared. Against Arnold's advice, Rishe insisted on cleaning the villa herself, proudly declaring, "I am a hostage." Much to Arnold's astonishment, you'd have expected him to shake his head. Anyways, as it was already established before, cleaning was no problem for someone like her, with her years of experience as a handmaid and all. As she was about to get some water, she noticed some maids bullying a newbie. They wanted to show off and intended to become the new crown princess's handmaid, but they unknowingly acted rudely towards the very person they wanted to serve. Rishe didn't give anything away and became fast friends with the newbie named Elsie by expertly advising her on some tips on washing clothes. By sunset, Rishe was on the balcony, happily watching the city, feeling fulfilled that she had finally reached the country she longed for. Suddenly, she noticed Arnold's presence and called him to show himself, after which he told her about all the big and important buildings in the city that she excitedly pointed at. Arnold couldn't help but be amazed at Rishe's simplicity, not to mention all her knowledge and abilities. After all, they're not something that should have any use for a noble lady like her. Rishe then pointed out that whether something has use for her is up to her. Despite himself, Arnold touches her cheek and promises to support and assist her in whatever she wants. Before leaving, he tells her to think of something she wants in exchange for him, breaking his promise against touching her. This leaves Rishe with jelly legs and conflicted about Arnold's intentions for her. The next day, Rishe woke up just in time for Oliver's arrival. He came early to hand over the list of the guests they would have at the wedding ceremony. As expected, Rishe recognized some names. Oliver also handed her the list of names of those who will attend tomorrow evening's party, which she does not know about. The following evening, Rishe comes to Arnold's office and asks him to let her choose her own maids. Arnold has no problems with this, although he is more surprised by Rishe's appearance, which suggests she intends to attend the party that evening. Arnold had not intended for her to attend the party, which was meant to declare that the crown prince was still looking for a wife from the empire, completely disregarding her existence. But Rishe wasn't bothered by that at all. Instead, she wanted him to declare her existence and position to everyone. And so Arnold had no choice but to follow her wishes, and the two of them headed for the party. The moment the couple reached the ballroom, noblemen gathered around him with some of their daughters in tow. But Arnold expertly redirected their attention towards Rishe when he said, "I've found someone to be my wife," declaring her position as his future better half. Despite themselves, all the noblemen were in awe, especially at the fact that Arnold had just made it clear how he intended to protect her no matter what. Shortly after, the music began, and the two of them started to own the floor. Halfway through, Rishe had the mischievous thought of trying to take the lead from Arnold, but every time she attempts, the crown prince simply manages to take it back. By the time the music stopped, a resounding applause was given to them, much to Rishe's discomfort. Later that evening, Rishe found herself alone on the balcony with a glass of tampered champagne from one of the noble ladies who wanted to bare their fangs against Rishe and shamefully failed. The spicy champagne was taken and finished by Arnold, who came to her to ask why she was distracted during their dance. Rishe explained that she had noticed how awkward Arnold's movement was on his left shoulder and wondered if he had a wound there. Although surprised that she noticed, Arnold didn't hesitate to show her the scars on the base of his neck. Rishe looked at it sadly, especially since it was a wound from a blade struck over and over again with the intention to kill. When Rishe tried asking about it, Arnold simply ignored her question and headed back inside. Meanwhile, on a floor below the balcony, a mysterious young man smiles, ominously. On another day, Rishe was helping the newer maids as they washed clothes when the senior maids came and scolded them for taking time to finish their tasks properly. Rishe offered to help them, all the while trying to observe everyone's behavior. She also started asking the newbies questions about Diana, the senior handmaid who had been the cheekiest, and learned that she used to be the daughter of a wealthy merchant before becoming a maid in the palace. Not long after, the day Rishe's personal maids were chosen arrived. Everyone was surprised that the villa was clean, despite not being used for so long. However, what surprised everyone even more was that the girl who often helped them with their chores was, in fact, the crown princess. Rishe soon after listed off all the maids she'll take in as her handmaids. As expected, Diana and her friends are not included, and Rishe even tells Diana to stop being a maid. But it was not because of Diana's rudeness to her in the past couple of days. After she tells Diana what she has done wrong, Rishe declares that she intends to make the villa a training ground for maids and offers Diana the position of teaching them, which she gratefully accepts. A couple of days later, Diana was letting Rishe look at the materials she had prepared for the lessons when Elsie came in and reminded Rishe that it was about time for her to prepare. Rishe's most valued dress lay on her bed. She intended to be in her best appearance when she meets the merchant, much to Elsie's confusion. However, all these are necessary if Rishe wants to gain allies and achieve her goals in the future. Shortly after, Rishe welcomes in the man who had taught her everything she knows about trading, Kane Tully, of the Area Trading Company. At first, Rishe thought that everything was going according to her plans. However, Kane proved to be not an easy opponent when he suddenly said, "I haven't a single item I would sell to you." Rishe was, of course, very confused, but it was simply because Kane saw right through her and could tell that her intentions weren't simply just to buy goods from them. At this point, Rishe couldn't do anything as the man cut their meeting short and left, although not before telling her that their group will be staying in the capital for a couple of days. The next day, Rishe was tending to her garden, where she planned to plant medicinal plants. She remembered Kane telling her from her previous life that merchants should be the ones to choose their customers. She felt disappointed that she couldn't make him choose her. Still, she couldn't just give up since making a connection with him was vital for her future goals. Suddenly, she realizes what she missed and tells her guards that she will be turning in for the day. Evening came. Kane was just getting back to their inn when he saw a disguised Rishe perfectly fine, while the rest of his men were down from being so drunk. As expected, Kane's parting words to her before were an invitation for a private meeting between them. However, the fact that she outdrunk his men as she waited for him was beyond his imagination. Getting down to business, Kane points out that he already noticed how Rishe intended to be a business partner to his trading company rather than a simple customer. And so, Kane encourages her to lay out her grand plan, but she refuses, although she still wants to establish the partnership. Following his principles, this is a huge turnoff on Kane's part, and Rishe already knows that, which is exactly why she has already devised a plan to convince him. Rishe promises to think of a business that will prove successful in the capital, and when she does, she asks him to reconsider her offer. Kane gladly agrees and gives her a week to fulfill her promise. Rishe then stood to leave shortly after, although not before giving Kane a pouch, which she asked, to be given to her drinking buddies from earlier once they woke up. It was already very late when Rishe sneaked back to her room. She was surprised to see Arnold patiently waiting for her. He immediately went into business mode and told her about hearing that the trading company had rejected doing business with her earlier, which is a very unlikely story. The atmosphere was very tense, and Rishe simply thought that Arnold was upset because she had sneaked out despite the position she held as the future crown princess. But that wasn't why he was upset, though. Arnold is simply worried about her safety and thus tells her that next time she plans on sneaking out, he will go with her. Arnold figured that, instead of stopping her, he should just join her instead and make sure she was safe in her escapades. Seeing no other options, Rishe relented. Before they could discuss her recent trip further, Rishe suddenly offered to cook something for them both. Soon after, they were in the kitchen. Despite her bold words and efforts, Rishe admits defeat and confesses to the prince that she's a terrible cook. It's just one of the things that she can't do. To her surprise, however, Arnold didn't hold the same opinion as her once he tasted her soup. After the two of them finished everything, surprisingly, Rishe explained to Arnold the deal she made with Kane, to which Arnold simply affirms. This made Rishe wonder why he was not asking more questions about what she intended to do. But Arnold simply knows that there's no point, since she won't tell her anything anyway, and the only thing he can do now is support her. Before leaving, though, Arnold warns her against meeting or entertaining his younger brother, although he didn't say anything, as to why. The next day, Rishe goes to tend to her garden, feeling tired from having to stay up researching stuff about the Empire and such. Between helping Diana with the teaching materials, tending to her medicinal garden, and preparing for the wedding ceremony, Rishe has no choice but to give up on sleep for a while, so much for being allowed to laze around. As she and her guards turned a corner to her garden, they were surprised to see someone sleeping soundly on the ground. The guards were agitated and warned Rishe to stay back. This commotion, however, is what woke up the stranger. He turned out to be Arnold's younger brother, Prince Theodore August Hein. Introducing himself as the second in line to the throne, he enthusiastically claims how he had wanted to meet her for a while, but Arnold simply wouldn't. Still, Rishe didn't forget her manners and politely curtsied to the prince. After this, he wittingly beckoned her to his side, or at least that was what he thought. Crouching on the ground, Theodore whispers to Rishe that he wants to help her escape the fate of being a hostage, but since this was established long ago, it doesn't really concern Rishe. Seemingly giving up, Theodore enthusiastically bids goodbye. Later that day, as Rishe was on her way back from the garden, Theodore's words still played in her mind, bothering her. She tried asking her guards about it, but they couldn't answer her as they were not allowed to reveal it. Rishe figured that she'd eventually have to investigate this matter, although her bet with Kane came first. Reaching the end of the hallway, Rishe noticed Arnold arguing with someone about letting the noble families put more effort into securing the safety of their people. At first, Arnold looked like he was about to simply resolve the argument through intimidation, but after he saw Rishe and noticed her attempt to support him, he changed his approach into a more peaceful one. That evening, after Rishe turned in for the night, she noticed a note addressed to her from Arnold to meet her at the chapel at midnight. Rishe looked at the note suspiciously, but still she went. As expected, it wasn't Arnold who summoned her there, but Theodore. Still with us so far? I hope you're enjoying this video. There's more where that came from, and all you gotta do is hit that bell button. And so, Theodore wastes no time and tells about how cruel a murderer his brother is. But that's not news to someone who was already killed by Arnold himself. What surprised Rishe, however, is the fact that Theodore is accusing his brother of killing his mother, although she should have expected it, seeing as she already knows how he's capable of killing his father. Still, those weren't enough to scare Rishe away from Arnold, much to Theodore's astonishment. Suddenly, Arnold arrives and Rishe encourages them to talk. But that was just wishful thinking on her part, and soon Theodore excused himself shamefully. Now that it's just Rishe and Arnold left at the chapel, the two have a moment where, once again, Rishe proves to Arnold just how much trust she has for him. She even went as far as calling him my husband, as cringe as that may be. Moved by this unexpected dedication, Arnold is compelled to return the favor. Without another word or warning, Arnold pulls Rishe towards him for a smoochie. And that, folks, is how the power couple had their first kiss and hug. The next morning, Rishe was in the kitchen, still reeling from yesterday night's events. By how she reacted, it could even be assumed that it was her first in all of her 45 years of living. She was also bothered when Arnold said that she didn't have to take her role seriously. Anyway, Rishe's musings were interrupted by Elsie's arrival, who was quite worried about her not having enough sleep again. Elsie then noticed Rishe's sparkly and colorful nails. Rishe explained that it was the product she was thinking of proposing to Kane and offered to put it on her. Elsie was quite happy and very grateful for Rishe's kindness. And of course, it's not because nail polish just makes everyone happy. Anyways, amidst their heart-to-heart, Rishe realized the reality of this country's common people that should be addressed, and she's determined to do something about it. D-Day came. Rishe presented her proposal to Kane, and although he received it well at first, he still had some misgivings about it, especially because Rishe wanted people from the slums to be the workforce behind the manufacturing of the products. It's not something that she's willing to compromise, however. So, she decided to use her trump card. See, it seems like Kane's sister has an incurable disease, and Rishe is confident that she will be able to cure her using her medicinal expertise. This is not part of the transaction, though, but just an act of goodwill on her part. She wants to make Kane understand that just like him, there are common people out there who are doing their best for their families despite difficulties. Admitting defeat, Kane finally gave in and agreed to form a partnership with Rishe. For someone who wants to live a carefree and lazy life, she's definitely having the best of it. That said, with all the immediate concerns now addressed, Rishe's body finally gives in. Later that evening, Oliver hurried over to check on Rishe but was surprised when she wasn't in her room. Meanwhile, in some back alley, someone welcomes the arrival of Theodore. The plot thickens as it turns out that Elsie and one of Rishe's guards, Hamel, are in fact in cahoots with Theodore and have now just kidnapped the weakened Rishe. Theodore visits Rishe in the room where she was kept, with Elsie and Hamel right behind him, revealing to her his involvement in the abduction so that he can make his brother angry with him, insisting that the only time he could make Arnold look at him was when he did something concerning Rishe. In short, he's saying that he gets off of it, although Rishe has other ideas. Then again, it doesn't really matter, and Theodore leaves the room with Elsie and Hamel in tow, appearing unbothered. Now, before wrong assumptions are made, let's go back to a few hours prior to this incident. See, Rishe knew her maid and guard were in cahoots with Theodore all along. With her body weakened, this was the perfect time for them to fulfill their role as his spies and get to the bottom of the royal brothers' issues at the same time. Back to the present, Theodore meets Arnold in the same building. He feels so good about himself as he tells Arnold that in exchange for letting Rishe go, he wants Arnold to surrender the throne to him. The Crown Prince, however, seems really unbothered by the whole situation and instead just asks where he had imprisoned Rishe. Although confused, Theodore explained that he had put her in a locked room somewhere with a window. He was so confident that she wouldn't be able to escape since the room was on the upper floor, which just made Arnold more amused. And to prove his point, Rishe suddenly came rushing into the room, sporting a revealing slit in her dress and a confident smile on her face. Rishe then started listing all the things that Theodore had done wrong in her capture, like leaving her alone in the room, not searching her for hidden weapons, and even leaving her unbound. She said them like she'd already done all of them herself, which she probably did. Especially when she said, "Break both their arms and both their legs." Suddenly, Arnold stops her lecture by putting his coat on her and revealing the hidden scar on his neck. The fact that Rishe knows about it and Theodore doesn't make him feel more disheartened. What's more, Rishe proves to have figured out all his true intentions, although he strongly denies them. Just as things get more heated, Arnold cuts in once again and lets them know just how much he doesn't care about his brother, or at least that's how he wants it to appear. Nevertheless, Arnold's words were the last straw, and Theodore stormed out of the room. Now that it's just the two of them left, Rishe asks Arnold to be honest with his feelings, and why he's acting like someone who's bound to disappear in the future and leave the Empire in the hands of Theodore. But just like his younger brother, Arnold denies this. Rishe isn't fooled, however, and once again, she makes her determination to become a reliable wife known to him. Without another word, Rishe storms out of the room. Meanwhile, Theodore was on the rooftop, reminiscing about the past when he was saved by his brother in the campsite during the war. Back then, Arnold had told him that he shouldn't do anything that would put his life at risk. It was one of the rare occasions when Arnold acted like a brother to him, if not only. Anyways, shortly after, Rishe arrives and once again starts sharing her thoughts with Theodore. See, the two of them had a certain level of understanding of what was going on in Arnold's head, and were really just acting in a way in which they believed they could be useful to him. As for Theodore, if it meant he had to disappear to do so, then he would. This is not an option for Rishe, however, since she also needs Theodore's help with her plans. Not that he thinks he's capable of that. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, Theodore still decided that the best option for him was to go. Rishe fell as she tried to stop Theodore from doing the unthinkable, much to her horror. Fortunately, Arnold came to the rescue just in time and effortlessly pulled his brother back to safety. After this, he scolded his younger brother. It still turned out for the best. Since this time, the two of them started being honest about their feelings and finally made up. Now that the brothers had finally sorted out their issues, it was time for Rishe to give in to fatigue. Theodore panicked at first, but Arnold assured him that she was simply tired. Once again, Theodore saw just how much Arnold cared for Rishe. The next morning, Rishe woke up in her room. Arnold was also there, having brought his work so he could stay with her all this time. He handed her a letter from Theodore, which contained his apology and gratitude for the efforts she made for them, as well as his assurance to support her in the future. And there's Arnold, who gets back at Rishe's cheekiness so far by telling her to think of something she wants in exchange for him, breaking his promise of touching her. Cue in the memory from a few nights ago when he stole a kiss. Rishe briefly appeared awkward and shy as Arnold hinted about his feelings for her. A few days later, Rishe appears at Theodore's office and starts off by congratulating him for the improvement in his relationship with Arnold. However, that wasn't really the reason for her visit. Rishe asks him for a favor, and although Theodore is reluctant to do it, Rishe isn't really giving him an option. Later that day, back at Arnold's office, Oliver had handed him a letter from the Kingdom of Koyol. Upon reading the contents, Arnold's mood suddenly turned sour, although it seems like it wouldn't stay for long with Rishe's sudden appearance. Rishe explains that she wants him to check out the room that the maids from her villa had prepared for him. At the same time, she lets Arnold know that she had, in fact, intended to live in the villa with him all along. This sudden excursion proved to be the very thing that Arnold needed to improve his mood, and thus he went along with Rishe's request without hesitation. Shortly after, they arrived at the room. Rishe proudly shows off the work of the maids, which Arnold genuinely appreciates. He also praises her for the efforts she's made so far, although Rishe doesn't really take them seriously. Anyways, Rishe explains that the room is the best in the villa and is right next to hers, which will make it easier for their guards. For Arnold, though, the appeal comes from the fact that it'd be easier for him to catch Rishe the next time she sneaks out again. Changing the topic, Rishe reminds him of his promise to spar with him. She explained that she wanted to learn from him the special training method that he and the Imperial Knights used, insisting that his techniques were the most powerful in the world. And coming from someone who has actually traveled the world, this ought to be credible. As expected, Arnold easily grants her request and tells her to change into something comfortable as he goes ahead to the training ground. Not long after, the sparring was about to begin. The special method that Rishe was so curious about turned out to be special restraints that mimic unexpected conditions, such as long limbs or eyesight. That said, before they begin, Arnold promises to take it easy for her sake. But of course, that's not really what Rishe wanted. And so she added a condition to their sparring so that the one who loses grants the victor a wish. As the sparring starts, Rishe knows that she'll have a disadvantage the longer it takes. With that in mind, she decided to do a frontal attack and did her best to try and get a hit. Arnold has the overwhelming advantage, however. In fact, as she attacked him, he was even able to point out all her mistakes and give her advice on what to do. Rishe immediately applied all the pointers and, with the help of her experience of fighting Arnold, managed to avoid 2 of his fatal moves. Suddenly, he voices out how he's envious of the person Rishe is thinking of as she avoids his attacks, thinking that it is someone more powerful than he is. Yet again, another ML is getting jealous of himself. For the last hurrah, though, Rishe thought of attacking Arnold the same way she did in the past, in which she was able to nick his face. Arnold, however, was able to block it, and even disarmed Rishe in the process, making it his win. With their sparring now coming to an end, Arnold asks Rishe to free 2 afternoons as his prize for their bet, although he didn't really explain why, other than they're going to town. Arnold then wonders why Rishe hadn't gotten up from the ground even though they're already done, in which she awkwardly admits that it's because her arms and legs are trembling and that she would rather rest for a bit. That's a no-go for Arnold, of course, so he proceeded to carry her. This shouldn't be a problem since he's wearing gloves, so he's technically not breaking his promise of no touchy-touchy. Then again, Rishe is still very much flustered, unaware that it wasn't the first time that he had done such a thing. Much to everyone's delight, the two of them made quite a scene as they made their way back. During this, Rishe started 20 questions with Arnold, in which he willingly participated to some extent. Fast forward to one afternoon. Rishe meets Oliver as he overlooks the move of Arnold's stuff to his new room in the villa. He voices his concern about Arnold refusing to take a nap, despite having been forced to take a night shift in patrol duties. Compelled to do something about it, Rishe eventually convinces Arnold to take a nap in his room when she suddenly declares, "I shall lull you to sleep, Prince Arnold," and promises to stay with him until he does. At first, nothing seems to work, even when Rishe starts using the methods that worked with the young lady she had taken care of before. On a different note, it seems that unknowingly seducing the prince is also one of Rishe's talents, which Arnold, fortunately or not, managed to dodge safely. The fact that the two of them are starting to get closer more than ever is undeniable, and something that they both welcome. Later that evening, Elsie welcomes Rishe back and informs her of a package that the Aria Trading Company had sent over. The package turned out to be a wig, and something that Rishe used as she participated while in disguise at the 10-day training for the newly recruited knight candidates. It turns out that Theodore was behind Rishe's participation in the training program. He was initially reluctant to grant her request, but after thinking it over and letting his mischievousness kick in, he promised to give Rishe his support. That said, as expected, Rishe was behind the training program, not just because she's a girl, but also because of how intense the Galkine Empire's training is. As Rishe tries to catch her breath, she is joined by a fellow trainee named Fritz, who is from the port town of Sutena, which ships from Koyol's dock. Fritz came to the capital to become a knight after he was inspired by Arnold, whom he greatly admired. Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of Count Lawvine, who advised Rishe to eat lots of chicken since she had fewer muscles compared to her peers. Well, duh! Soon after, Rishe goes to a little shed where she has hidden yet another disguise and eventually returns to the villa as if nothing happened. Elsie is waiting for her with the day's dress to wear. When Rishe went down to officially start her day, Arnold and Oliver were already waiting. Arnold then whispers for her to secretly meet him the next day at the western back gate. In return, she whispers back if she should change her hair color for this trip. The two of them spoke in such low voices that Elsie and Oliver couldn't help but get curious, especially Elsie, who was determined when she said, "I promise I will make you lovelier than anyone else ever could." After all, she was convinced it was a date. Well, everyone thinks it was a date, probably even Rishe herself. Fast forward to the following day, Elsie's efforts proved fruitful as Arnold praised Rishe's appearance. Surprisingly, their quote-and-unquote date started in the marketplace, where Rishe excitedly recognized a bunch of products being sold. Later, Arnold leads the way to an underground shop where Rishe's skills in appraising gems are put to the test, and one that she passes with flying colors. As it turns out, Arnold's wish is not simply Rishe's company, but actually being allowed to buy her a ring for their wedding. And not just any simple ring, but one with a gem that she chooses herself. Although reluctant at first, Rishe eventually gives in and chooses a gem with the color the same as the Arnold's eyes. Rishe chose it unconsciously, making things awkward afterward, at least for her. The two eventually headed for the North Gate watchtower around sunset. Even without Arnold saying anything, Rishe concluded that he was actually waiting for someone to arrive from there. And so, Arnold explained how delegates from the Kingdom of Koyols are expected to arrive after making an excuse of wanting to celebrate beforehand since they wouldn't be able to attend their wedding ceremony. Arnold found everything suspicious, which is why he took precautionary measures. As for Rishe, it seemed that she was also closely acquainted with their guest from her previous life. The following day, Arnold and Rishe were expecting to meet Prince Kyle after his audience with the Emperor. Although still suspicious, the two of them welcomed the prince politely. Kyle was quite the cringy gentleman as he expressed how honored he was to meet Rishe, which just added to Arnold's dislike for him. Rishe noticed Kyle's alarming physical condition, along with the glare that Arnold had directed toward him. And knowing her, she'll probably misinterpret the meaning behind Arnold's actions again. Anyways, after the tea time that they had with Kyle, Arnold admitted that he still didn't understand what the foreign prince's purpose was for coming. After all, he even brought with him some scholars, one in particular who also seemed to be acquainted with Rishe from her past life. More importantly, Rishe smoothly opens up about hearing that Kyle is sickly, which is why she would like to prepare medicine for him to take. But see, letting Kyle take medicine without him getting suspicious is the least of Rishe's concerns. As it turns out, a party is going to be held in Kyle's honor, where Arnold plans for him and Count Lawvine to meet. Seeing as Rishe is obligated to attend the event, she's worried that the Count will recognize her. Are you still up for more twists? Hit that thumbs up and subscribe. We'll keep the drama coming, and all you have to do is sit and enjoy. Rishe was in her garden worrying about Count Lawvine and how to get Kyle to drink her medicine when a man suddenly appeared. His name is Michel Heaven, Rishe's teacher in her third life, and he appears to be very interested in Rishe's herb garden. After they briefly discussed the nail polish that Rishe had developed, they agreed to have a teacher and student relationship while he was in the capital. Michel is a very perceptive man, and he immediately figured out how Rishe had planned to let Kyle take the medicine made from her garden herbs. That evening, Rishe finally got her opportunity. With the help of her teacher's influence, Kyle agreed to take it. Well, more like Michel forced him into it. Whether it was due to Michel's eccentricity or because they just had a good relationship, Michel is even allowed to say, "You should be used in this experiment," to the prince of his own country. Anyways, their dynamic is quite hilarious, but the process went through without much hitch. Later, as Kyle was sent back to his room, Michel handed Rishe his research records, and she happily started reading them. Suddenly, she remembers the conversation she had with him in her previous life, where they discussed a compound that he was working on. It was, pretty much, complete, but the problem is that he doesn't have anyone who can use it the way that he wants. Just then, one of Rishe's guards rushed in to announce that Arnold had come to take her back. Rishe then introduced Michel as her temporary teacher. In return, Arnold promised to support them on anything they'd need. All the while, he makes sure to point out clearly that Rishe is his future wife. Jealous princes aside. On their way back, Arnold gives her his pocket watch, after she admits that she often loses track of time when working on something. Rishe observes that Arnold doesn't hesitate to utilize new technologies if they are convenient for achieving his goals. Fast forward to the evening of the party in honor of Kyle. After giving her greetings to him, Rishe excused herself to talk to the guests, although not before using the technique she mastered in her fifth life in detecting someone in the crowd. Once she had a good grasp of Count Lawvine's location, she started socializing around the hall, making sure she didn't come into contact with him in any way. One of the people she talked to was the son of the gem shop owner Rishe and Arnold had previously visited. Once again, Rishe became an object of admiration by the noblewomen around her after they found out that not only was Rishe accepted as the client, but Arnold was also the one who bought the jewelry himself for her. Rishe, actually, received word from the owner that the ring would be completed earlier than planned, after she had contacted an artisan from Koyol. The son then explained that it was because artisans from the kingdom of Koyol had superior craftsmanship techniques. Anyways, out of the corner of her eye, Rishe noticed Arnold and Kyle going somewhere together and decided to follow them in secret. Once they were alone, Kyle wasted no time, letting Arnold know about the real purpose of his visit. As it turns out, the kingdom of Koyols is in danger of getting attacked by its neighboring countries. Thus, he would like to form an alliance with Galkine and receive military support. The only problem is that alliances are made with the parties involved getting benefits. Unfortunately, with the resources of Koyols running low, there isn't much they can offer, and so Arnold rejects it. After all, rather than forming a non-beneficial alliance, it's better just to invade and take control of a country. As someone fully aware of the future events, the eavesdropper, Rishe, couldn't help but be concerned and invested in this issue. Kyle returns to his room, with a long face, and explains to Michel how the alliance is impossible since Arnold prefers invasions over alliances. Michel is quite pleased, knowing that he has finally found the person he has been looking for. One day, Rishe was training by herself in disguise, although her mind was filled with matters concerning Koyol. Just then, Count Lawvine arrived, and after a brief talk, Rishe resolved to do whatever she could to help both Kyle and Arnold. Later that morning, much to Rishe's astonishment, Arnold came to observe their training. Just as she thought that Arnold would let it go after seeing through her disguise, he later pulls her into a secluded area for a confrontation. Of course, Rishe tried to deny it at first. However, perhaps also due to the perfectly executed Cabadon, Arnold eventually managed to get her to confess. Well, Arnold let it go in the end, and allowed her to continue the training with a few conditions. After that issue was settled, Rishe confessed that she had overheard his conversation with Kyle that night. Arnold had already expected it, as well as what Rishe was probably thinking. Not that it makes any difference. Arnold still won't change his decision about the proposed alliance. As it turns out, Kyle is actually closely acquainted with Rishe, not just in her second life but also in her first and third. Because of that, she's determined to help him no matter what. Later that day, Rishe visits Kyle in his room with his medicine, which he gratefully takes. She then confesses that she had overheard his conversation with Arnold that night, seeing as he's still determined to push the alliance. Rishe proposes an alliance with him to convince Arnold of the real thing. Much later that day, Rishe came to return Michel research. Their conversation soon turned to Michel requesting an audience with Arnold. Rishe had wanted to avoid such a thing happening. After all, she already knew that Michel wanted to talk to Arnold about the black powder, the compound that Michel had invented, and that Rishe would never approve of since it was bound to take countless lives. While on her way back, Rishe was approached by Theodore, who came to confirm that Arnold had found out about her double life and bragged about how he knew many things thanks to his network. Speaking of which, Rishe asks Theodore to borrow his so-called network. After Rishe tells him that it would be used for something that's the same as an act of rebellion against Arnold, he is all up for it. By dusk, Michel was alone as he reminisced about his childhood and how it had probably traumatized him. When his father said, "You were born to bring us misfortune," and cursed him as a bringer of death, not literally, but anyway. Since he was young, he has been fascinated with knowledge and research. After the war that left him to become the only living alchemist, Michel accidentally developed the black powder, aka bombs, missiles, you get the idea. His musings were interrupted by Rishe, who once again tried to convince him against using the deadly compound. But just like in her previous life, she still failed to talk him out of it. Rishe was trying to think of ways to help Kyle and convince Michel when the fireflies outside her room suddenly caught her attention. As she went to her balcony to admire the light bugs, Arnold appeared from his. After noticing that the fireflies seemed to be attracted to where Arnold was, Rishe decided to come to his side. And since a shortcut is the best cut, of course, Rishe decided just to jump in between balconies to go to Arnold's side. Despite knowing that Rishe is someone fully capable of doing something like that safely, Arnold unconsciously tries to catch her. Rishe's heart probably went haywire when Arnold said, "Even I don't know, I moved reflexively," after she asked why he would do that. Proving that even a stoic man can become cheesy in the face of love. Anyways, the topic of conversation turned to Arnold's eyes, which he admits to having hated so much that he wanted to gouge both of them when he was young, just because it was proof that he had the same blood as the Emperor. It's also because of this feeling against the Emperor that Arnold couldn't get himself to admire anything from his own country. In all honesty, he just hates everything about it. Rishe tried to encourage him to try learning to like it, but it didn't look like he'd be convinced anytime soon. Arnold explained that he'll do whatever he has to in order to achieve his goals, even if that means that he'll take lives. And Rishe is no exception. In fact, if Rishe gets in his way and continues to convince him in favor of helping Koyol, then he won't hesitate to get rid of her as well. Unaffected, Rishe tells him that she can't promise not to get in his way. Whatever happens, she will still do whatever she can to achieve her goals as well, even if it means getting cast aside by the prince. Although even if that did happen, she promised him that she'd still return to the palace and to his side no matter what. The following day, Rishe met with Kyle. He showed her all the things that she had requested of him, even the ones that were difficult to obtain, like the finely powdered metals. Kyle also reported how he managed to obtain another meeting with Arnold, and asked Rishe if the items they prepared would be enough to change Arnold's decision. Rishe admits that she's not 100% sure, although she's certain that it would at least entice him to listen. D-Day came. Rishe was allowed to attend the meeting. With her backing, Kyle was able to present another bargaining chip for the alliance, which is the Kingdom of Koyol's techniques and expertise in craftsmanship, not only for jewelry making, but also for making things like pocket watches. Unfortunately, it still wasn't enough to convince Arnold. Their talks are suddenly interrupted by the arrival of Theodore, who discreetly lets Rishe know that there's an emergency. Without another word, Rishe excuses herself and comes with Theodore. The second prince wasted no time in informing her how they had lost track of Michel about 3 hours ago. It turns out, she had requested that Michel be followed around. Suddenly, one of Theodore's retainers informs him that they finally found his whereabouts, after which Rishe didn't waste time heading to him. When Rishe tried to approach Michel, she was stopped by several guards. They informed her of how Michel had declared that he was going to cause a disturbance at 6 in the evening. Rishe then realized that Michel had planned it so that he'd be able to have an audience with Arnold. There is still no way to convince Michel to change his mind about using his compound for violence. In fact, he's willing to sacrifice everything, even his humanity and himself, just so he can see to what extent his invention can do. Suddenly, Theodore comes rushing in and gives Rishe a thumbs up, informing her that whatever they were plotting was a success. This gives Rishe assurance. And so, she started talking about how even something that was conceived to bring misfortune to others can still be used to bring happiness instead. It's all about perspective. That is, adding and subtracting variables in order to achieve different results. As she had anticipated, a light suddenly shot up into the sky when the clock struck 6, eventually exploding and producing beautiful colors. Everyone was surprised, with the exception of Arnold, who seemed to have expected Rishe to pull something like this. As it turns out, using the different powdered metals that she obtained from Kyle, Rishe was able to make a variant of the black powder and produce colorful flames for everyone to admire. Rishe then thanks Theodore for all his hard work. It seems that she already had an idea of what Michelle had been planning and made preparations accordingly. It was all thanks to Theodore's men that everything proceeded without incident. The situation quickly turned sour, with the arrival of Count Lawvine, who was just about to arrest Michelle after he had declared he intended to cause a disturbance earlier. Fortunately, Arnold appears and tells the Count that the disturbance was actually a demonstration from the Koyol scholar. When the Count asked what the demonstration was about, Arnold explained that it was due to Galkine entering a technological partnership with Koyol. Although he's still not fully convinced, the Count eventually lets it go. Before leaving, Rishe approaches him and apologizes for hiding her identity all this time. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like he really minded. Anyways, after getting Michelle's word that he won't try endangering people's lives ever again for the sake of his research, Rishe approaches Arnold with a smile on her face. Before she says anything, though, he makes it clear that he didn't agree with the partnership out of goodwill, but that was good enough for Rishe. In fact, she promised to explain everything to him later and wouldn't complain about whatever decision he might make afterward regarding Michelle, although she also informed Arnold to consider the fact that Michelle himself was the creator of the pocket watch that he admired. That's to say, getting rid of him would definitely be a loss. Rishe also explains to Arnold how she had especially wanted him to see the fireworks. That way, he'd understand that even if something was considered dangerous, it could still cause happiness if handled correctly. Fast forward to a few days later. Now that the objective of their visit had been achieved, it was time for Kyle and Michelle to leave. Rishe gave Kyle additional medicine for the trip back as a parting gift. As for Michelle, although he failed to convince Rishe once again to come with him to pursue being a scholar, it was undeniable that their relationship would only grow further in the future as a teacher and student. Well now, seeing as this video is about to end, it's just right that an update on the development of the power couple's relationship is shown. Rishe came to Arnold, despite her nerves, to tell him that the ring they had ordered was finished. She admits that she hadn't looked at it yet since she wants to see it with him, after a slight misunderstanding, which was immediately resolved. After Arnold mumbled, "I have no right to wish any more than that," as he explained his intention for the ring. Rishe knew it wasn't because he really didn't care. In fact, he cares a lot, and is just afraid to show it, and so she acted childish for the first time, and convinced Arnold to put the ring on her finger. Not only did she invalidate the promise about touching her, but she also gave him another reason to believe just how much she's taking her position as his future wife seriously. Without another word, Arnold pulls Rishe to sit on the sofa and kneels before her. She was so flustered that she even forgot how to breathe. Just then, Arnold kisses her hand and asks permission to touch her, as if he isn't already doing it. Rishe closed her eyes as he put on the ring, and as she opened them, she couldn't help but admire the ring and express how just wearing them made her feel like she could accomplish anything. Arnold also felt happy knowing that it had that effect on her. And since an engagement ring isn't enough to declare how deep their feelings are for each other, Rishe confesses that now she has more things she wants to ask and do with her future hubby, such as going on a journey together to see the world. As for Arnold, just having Rishe with him is enough. Although he was the cause of her deaths in all of her previous lives, indirectly or not, Rishe made up her mind that in this life, she would do everything she could to see a happy future together with Arnold. That's it for us, guys. Thank you so much for sticking with us until the end. Get notified of our next videos by hitting the subscribe button and give us a like if you appreciate our work. Until the next recap. Ciao.